Welcome to History for Sleep, where the stories of our world unfold as you drift into dreams. Tonight, let the ancient past guide your imagination, from forgotten kingdoms to mysteries buried beneath the sands of time. Before your eyelids grow heavy, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, so the next time you can fall asleep to another story from the ages. Now, close your eyes, let history become your lullaby. And as you drift away, let's get into the video. Origins of the rebellion, Anunnaki, authority, and the seeds of conflict. Throughout human history, myths and legends have recounted a common theme: the rebellion of celestial beings against supreme authority. In Abrahamic tradition, we read of Satan's fall from heaven, a narrative of pride, ambition, and divine punishment. In Sumerian and Mesopotamian mythology, a remarkably similar story appears: the Anunnaki rebellion, a conflict among the gods themselves. Could these accounts be echoes of the same event? Are they symbolic, historical, or perhaps a combination of both? Part 1 examines the origins of the rebellion, the players involved, and the possible motivations that sparked a war in the heavens. 1. Who were the Anunnaki? To understand the rebellion, we must first define the protagonists. The Anunnaki are described in Sumerian texts as a group of deities who arrived on earth from the heavens. Their name is often interpreted as those who from heaven to earth came, or princely offspring of Anu. Anu, the sky god, held supreme authority in the pantheon. Role and hierarchy: the Anunnaki were organized with a clear hierarchy, led by Anu at the apex, followed by Enlil, Enki, and other divine figures. Each had domains: Enki with wisdom and water, Enlil with air and authority, Inanna with war and fertility. Purpose on earth: texts suggest the Anunnaki were involved in establishing human civilization, sometimes described as creating or guiding humanity, sometimes using humans as labor. Divine versus human relations: some scholars interpret these texts literally, others argue that they are allegorical, representing natural forces and human psychology. The key point is that the Anunnaki are portrayed as powerful entities with the ability to manipulate both mortal and celestial realms. This capacity sets the stage for conflict. 2. Authority and discontent. According to Sumerian myths, the Anunnaki were not always harmonious. The pantheon operated under strict rules set by Anu, and his authority was absolute. Yet, tension arose. Ambition versus hierarchy: some Anunnaki allegedly grew ambitious, desiring greater power than allotted by the divine order. Enki's role, known as the god of wisdom, Enki is sometimes depicted as sympathetic to humanity. Did this sympathy spark conflict with Enlil, the enforcer of order? Motivations for rebellion: could jealousy, desire for independence, or the pursuit of forbidden knowledge have motivated the revolt? Here, parallels emerge with the biblical story of Satan. The high-ranking celestial being grows dissatisfied with authority, seeks independence, and instigates a rebellion. The question arises: are these myths coincidental, or do they reflect a shared memory of a historical event interpreted through different cultural lenses? 3. Textual evidence of conflict. Sumerian and Akkadian texts hint at upheaval among the gods. The Enuma Elish, while primarily a creation myth, it describes battles among gods, rivalries, and challenges to authority. Marduk rises to power through combat, suggesting that rebellion and conflict are central to divine narratives. The Anzu myth, the theft of the Tablet of Destinies by Anzu, a demonic bird, may be interpreted as an act of rebellion against divine order, symbolizing power struggles among gods. Other tablets, some cuneiform tablets, mention disputes over rulership, resources, or influence on earth, which could represent fragments of a larger narrative of rebellion. While these texts are incomplete, the pattern of discord is undeniable. The Anunnaki were not monolithic, factions existed, and the seeds of war were present. 4. The nature of the rebellion. To classify the Anunnaki rebellion, we must ask: was it ideological, political, or technological? Ideological: some myths suggest disagreement over humanity. Enki supports humans, Enlil seeks control. Could the rebellion reflect ethical or philosophical divergence? Political: power struggles are common in hierarchies. Rebellion could have been motivated by rivalry among gods for dominance, prestige, or authority. Technological, ancient texts mention tools, weapons, and celestial devices. Could the rebellion have involved control over technologies that humans and gods could access, from heavenly chariots to the mysterious tablets of destinies? The rebellion, therefore, might not have been a simple quarrel but a complex struggle over cosmic governance, human influence, and control of knowledge. 5. Parallels with Satan's fall. In Christian tradition, Satan's fall is narrated as a rebellion against God. Hierarchy challenged. Satan, a high-ranking angel, challenges divine authority. Motivated by pride, desire to surpass God's authority is central. Consequences: expulsion from heaven, loss of position, and the establishment of a realm of influence outside divine order. Comparing this with the Anunnaki rebellion. Aspect: Anunnaki. Biblical satanic parallel. High-ranking entity. Enki, Enlil, other gods. Lucifer. Conflict with supreme authority. Anu. God. Motivation. Ambition, ethical divergence, power. Pride, desire to rival God. Outcome: war, displacement, factional divisions. Expulsion, establishment of hell, corruption of humanity. The similarities suggest a shared narrative structure, raising questions. Did ancient humans interpret the same celestial conflict differently in separate cultures? Were these accounts independent reflections of moral and cosmic truths? Or could they be distorted memories of actual events involving entities with extraordinary power? 6. Human involvement and observation. An important aspect of the Anunnaki myths is humanity's role. Observers or pawns, humans were often witnesses or instruments in divine conflicts. Some texts suggest humans were created to serve the Anunnaki, providing labor or tribute. Collateral influence: human societies, technologies, and knowledge may have been shaped by Anunnaki rivalries. Ethical dimension: the rebellion appears to reflect concerns about morality and order, indicating that divine conflict had direct repercussions for mortal life. The pattern mirrors biblical accounts, where Satan's rebellion has consequences for humanity, temptation, corruption, and the introduction of moral choice. 7. The stakes of the rebellion. Why would a rebellion among divine beings matter to humans or to the cosmos? Possible stakes include: control of humanity: the victor determines humanity's role and knowledge access. Cosmic authority: control over the tablets of destinies or equivalent tools could mean dominion over natural laws. Spatial dominion: ancient texts describe wars fought in heaven, earth, and skies. Could these be metaphors for energy control, planetary influence, or interstellar conflict? If so, the Anunnaki rebellion may not have been purely mythological. It may encode memory of a real conflict over power, knowledge, and cosmic jurisdiction, remembered symbolically in myths around the world. 8. Causes of discord among the Anunnaki. Several themes recur in Sumerian texts that hint at the rebellion's causes. Pride and hubris: some Anunnaki allegedly believed they could surpass Anu or manipulate reality independently. Ethical divergence: conflicts over humanity's fate, whether humans should be servants, allies, or independent, drove ideological divisions. Control of knowledge: certain deities may have sought access to sacred technologies or information forbidden to others. Resource conflicts: ancient myths describe disputes over gold, water, or other resources. These could be symbolic of broader power struggles. By examining these causes, we see a pattern strikingly similar to the biblical fall of Satan, a combination of ambition, pride, and desire to reshape the established order. 9. Potential consequences of the rebellion. If the rebellion escalated, what might have been at stake? Cosmic imbalance: myths hint at disturbances in heaven, earth, and possibly the human realm. Loss of order: fractured authority among gods could create chaos, with each faction pursuing different objectives. Human repercussions: civilizations may have been disrupted, knowledge restricted, or labor exploited to serve one side or another. Spiritual lessons: myths encode warnings about overreach, pride, and ethical boundaries, suggesting that the narrative served both descriptive and instructive purposes. This complexity suggests the Anunnaki rebellion was not merely quarrelsome mythology but a story reflecting interconnected celestial, moral, and human stakes. 10. Questions arising from Part 1. After examining the origins, motivations, and parallels with biblical accounts, several questions emerge. Did the rebellion occur literally, or is it allegorical? Were the Anunnaki and their conflicts remembered across cultures as moral and cosmic lessons? Did humanity's observation or participation in the rebellion influence early civilization, technology, or spiritual understanding? How do we reconcile similarities between the Anunnaki rebellion and Satan's fall? Are they parallel accounts, symbolic representations, or remnants of the same event? These questions set the stage for deeper inquiry in Part 2, where we will explore the factions within the Anunnaki, the nature of their conflicts, and the first battles that may have reshaped both heaven and earth. The story of the Anunnaki rebellion is as intriguing as it is complex. At its heart lies a struggle over authority, ambition, ethics, and knowledge. By comparing Sumerian myths to biblical accounts of Satan's fall, we observe striking parallels that suggest either a shared archetype or memory of an extraordinary event. Humanity, whether as witnesses or pawns, is deeply implicated in this cosmic drama, and the implications of these narratives continue to resonate in myths, religious texts, and the human psyche. Factions of the Anunnaki, seeds of conflict and the first confrontations. In Part 1, we examined the origins of the Anunnaki rebellion and its striking parallels with the biblical fall of Satan. We saw that ambition, pride, and disputes over authority may have driven celestial beings to conflict, with humans caught in the crossfire. Part 2 explores the factions that emerged among the Anunnaki, the ideological and political divisions that fueled rebellion, and the first confrontations that may have reshaped both heaven and earth. 1. Emergence of factions. While the Anunnaki were a hierarchical pantheon under Anu, ancient texts suggest internal divisions. Enlil and the enforcement faction, Enlil, god of air and executive authority, is portrayed as strict, enforcing order and hierarchy. He often advocates control over humans, dictating labor, agriculture, and obedience. Enki and the reformist faction, Enki, god of wisdom and water, is depicted as more sympathetic to humans, sometimes acting contrary to Enlil's edicts. He encourages technological and cultural advancement, granting humans knowledge, sometimes against divine restrictions. Inanna and the ambition faction, Inanna, goddess of war and fertility, embodies ambition and independence, often acting in unpredictable ways that challenge both Enlil and Enki. Other deities, lesser Anunnaki, are sometimes described as choosing sides, motivated by loyalty, self-interest, or philosophical alignment. These divisions created a complex network of allegiances that mirrored political conflicts on Earth, factions formed not simply out of hatred but over ideology, ethics, and vision for humanity. 2. Ideological differences. The Anunnaki rebellion was not just about power, it was also about philosophy. Humanity's role. Enlil viewed humans as subordinate laborers, a tool to accomplish divine objectives. Enki considered humans as potential partners, capable of growth and innovation. Knowledge access. Control over sacred knowledge was central. Certain tablets or technologies could shift balance of power. Enki's distribution of knowledge to humanity may have threatened Enlil's authority, sparking early conflict. Autonomy versus obedience. Some Anunnaki believed in absolute obedience to Anu. Others sought autonomy, creating friction that escalated into rebellion. These ideological differences mirror the biblical account of Lucifer, who challenges divine authority on the grounds of autonomy and perceived fairness. Both narratives explore the tension between obedience and independence. 3. Early signs of rebellion. Ancient texts hint that discord among the Anunnaki began subtly. Disputes over resources like gold or control over human labor. Secret alliances forming between ambitious deities. Acts of defiance, such as Enki granting forbidden knowledge or Inanna pursuing projects without Enlil's approval. These actions were small rebellions before open conflict, akin to political intrigue in mortal kingdoms. The seeds of war were sown long before the first battles erupted. 4. Human observers and influence. Humans, often depicted as pawns or witnesses, played a complex role. Knowledge transmission. Humans sometimes received advanced knowledge from Enki, enabling agriculture, architecture, and early technology. Labor mobilization. Enlil allegedly directed human labor for monumental projects, sometimes in opposition to Enki's guidance. Ethical implications. Humans could act as unwitting agents in divine disputes, highlighting a recurring theme: divine conflict shapes human destiny. This mirrors the biblical notion that humanity suffers consequences from the celestial rebellion, reflecting ethical and moral stakes across realms. 5. The catalyst for open conflict. What transformed factional disputes into full-scale rebellion? Several triggers are suggested. Control of the tablets of destinies. Ancient texts describe these tablets as instruments of cosmic authority, granting the holder control over the natural and spiritual order. Theft or attempted usurpation may have escalated tensions. Territorial disputes. Mythology speaks of heavenly territories, sacred mountains, and celestial domains. Conflicts over jurisdiction could spark confrontations. Human intervention. Humans empowered by Enki may have inadvertently challenged Enlil's authority, fueling the feud. The ethical treatment of humanity became a flashpoint. This illustrates a key insight: rebellion is often triggered when ambition collides with structured authority, especially when both factions perceive moral justification. 6. First battles and cosmic strife. Descriptions of the rebellion's early battles are fragmentary but suggest dramatic confrontations. Heavenly skirmishes. Some texts describe clashes in the skies, with celestial beings wielding unknown weapons and energies. Earthly impacts. Collateral effects included storms, floods, and disruptions in human society. These could be mythologized descriptions of natural disasters coinciding with political upheaval. Tactics and alliances. Factions use strategic maneuvering, alliances, and secret operations to gain advantage. The complexity mirrors historical human warfare. It is notable that these conflicts often had both symbolic and practical dimensions, affecting not only the Anunnaki hierarchy but also human civilization. 7. The role of pride and ambition. A recurring theme in rebellion myths is pride. Anunnaki pride. High-ranking gods believed they could act independently of Anu's authority. Human parallel. Ambition and pride, reflected in myths such as the Tower of Babel, suggest a pattern: when intelligence or capability grows without accountability, rebellion emerges. Moral lessons. Myths encode warnings about the consequences of overreach, ambition, and ethical misalignment. Pride is central to understanding the rebellion. It is not merely conflict over resources or territory but over perceived entitlement and autonomy. 8. Comparing Sumerian and biblical narratives. A striking parallel exists between the Anunnaki rebellion and the biblical fall of Satan. Theme: Anunnaki rebellion. Satan's fall. Hierarchical challenge. Factions challenge Anu. Lucifer challenges God. Motivation: pride, ambition, human advocacy. Pride, desire to rival God. Factional division: Enki versus Enlil, others. Fallen angels versus loyal angels. Human involvement: humans as laborious or recipients of knowledge. Humans tempted or corrupted. Consequences: cosmic disruption, reshape divine hierarchy. Expulsion, establishment of hell. These parallels suggest that cultural memory of celestial rebellion transcends civilizations, encoded differently in Mesopotamian and Hebrew traditions. 9. Ethical and cosmic stakes. The rebellion raises profound questions about ethics and cosmic governance. Can intelligence and autonomy coexist with hierarchical authority? Does ethical action justify rebellion against a higher order? How should powerful beings wield knowledge when human welfare is at stake? Sumerian texts suggest that the rebellion had lasting consequences: disruption in natural order, human suffering, and eventual consolidation of divine authority. These consequences reflect the moral dimension of cosmic conflict, a theme that persists in later religious traditions. Part 2 emphasizes several key points. The rebellion was multifaceted, involving ideology, power, and ethics. Factions among the Anunnaki reflected diverse priorities, from control to human advocacy. Early confrontations foreshadowed a full-scale war with lasting cosmic and human consequences. Humans, though often powerless, were deeply affected, both as participants and witnesses. The rebellion illustrates timeless themes: ambition, pride, ethical responsibility, and the consequences of challenging authority. Understanding these factions and early conflicts is essential for grasping the broader narrative of the Anunnaki rebellion and its resonance with biblical and global myths. The Anunnaki rebellion began as ideological and political friction among powerful celestial beings. Factions formed, alliances shifted, and small acts of defiance escalated into open conflict. Humans were drawn into the struggle, witnessing or participating in events that would shape civilization and morality. By comparing Sumerian and biblical accounts, we see a recurring pattern: rebellion, pride, and the pursuit of autonomy are universal challenges for intelligence, whether divine or mortal. In Part 3, we will explore the escalation of the war, examining key battles, strategies, and the tools of cosmic conflict as the rebellion reaches its climax and begins to reshape heaven and earth. Escalation of the war, battles, strategies, and cosmic conflict. In Part 2, we examined the factions among the Anunnaki and the early signs of rebellion, noting the ideological and political divisions that set the stage for conflict. Part 3 focuses on the escalation of the war, exploring how disputes among gods developed into open confrontation, the strategies and tools employed, and the consequences for both heaven and earth. This section also examines parallels with the biblical account of Satan's fall, suggesting shared archetypes of cosmic struggle. 1. From discontent to open rebellion. Factional disputes among the Anunnaki may have started subtly, but eventually, they escalated into full-scale rebellion. The process can be traced through several stages. Secret alliances: certain Anunnaki aligned with Enki or Inanna against Enlil and loyalists. Espionage and subversion: texts suggest clandestine efforts to undermine authority, including manipulation of humans to support one side. Initial confrontations: small-scale skirmishes in the celestial realm served as tests of loyalty and power. These stages reflect the gradual evolution of rebellion, highlighting that conflicts often begin in the shadows before exploding into open warfare. 2. Ideological and ethical motivations. The rebellion was not purely a power struggle, it also involved profound ideological and ethical dimensions. Autonomy versus hierarchy: Enki and his allies sought independence from Anu's strict hierarchy. Human advocacy: Enki's sympathy toward humanity put him at odds with Enlil's vision of obedience and control. Moral authority: some factions justified rebellion as a moral imperative, believing they acted for the greater good. This mirrors the biblical narrative, where Satan's rebellion is framed as both a challenge to authority and an assertion of perceived justice, highlighting the moral complexity of cosmic conflicts. 3. The first battles: heaven in turmoil. Ancient texts describe the first battles as dramatic confrontations in the skies. Celestial arenas: battles took place across heavenly realms, with deities wielding unknown weapons and energies. Strategic maneuvering, alliances and betrayals played a central role, reflecting both tactical and ideological considerations. Symbolic representation: skies filled with storms, fire, and celestial phenomena may represent the manifestation of cosmic energy. Some historians interpret these descriptions metaphorically, suggesting that the battles represent conflicts of authority, knowledge, and influence, while others speculate on advanced technologies that could manipulate energy or matter. 4. Tools of cosmic conflict. What weapons or tools were available to the Anunnaki? Ancient texts and comparative mythology provide intriguing clues. Celestial chariots, known as Vimanas in some texts, these vehicles enabled rapid movement across Earth and heavens. Energy devices, references to tablets, rods, or instruments suggest mechanisms capable of controlling natural forces. Ritualized power, spoken incantations, geometric alignments, and sacred timing may have amplified the effectiveness of weapons or strategies. The combination of physical, technological, and ritual power suggests that the rebellion was not a simple battle, but a sophisticated contest combining strategy, knowledge, and cosmic influence. 5. Earthly consequences of heavenly battles. Though fought in the heavens, the rebellion had tangible effects on Earth. Natural disasters, floods, storms, earthquakes, and celestial phenomena could be interpreted as collateral effects of divine conflict. Civilizational disruption, early human settlements may have experienced destruction or upheaval, influencing myths, religious practices, and societal development. Knowledge transfer, Enki's allies continued to provide humans with selective knowledge, shaping agriculture, architecture, and early governance. These effects mirror biblical accounts where Satan's rebellion indirectly affects humanity, highlighting the interconnectedness of celestial and terrestrial domains. 6. Strategies and factional tactics. The rebellion involved more than brute force, strategic maneuvering was key. Divide and conquer, loyalists sought to prevent coordination among rebels, while Enki's faction leveraged alliances to undermine authority. Psychological tactics, propaganda, deception, and manipulation of perception appear in myths, including false promises or illusions. Territorial control, sacred mountains, celestial realms, and earthly territories became contested zones of influence. These strategies suggest a highly organized conflict, with faction leaders employing both tactical intelligence and symbolic displays of power. 7. Parallels with satanic rebellion. The escalation of the Anunnaki conflict mirrors the biblical narrative of Satan's fall in key ways. Aspect: Anunnaki rebellion. Biblical rebellion. Cause: pride, ideological conflict, desire for autonomy. Pride, desire to rival God. Participants: loyalists versus rebels among gods. Angels loyal to God versus Lucifer's followers. Tools: celestial chariots, ritualized power, knowledge. Spiritual authority, angelic power, influence over creation. Consequences: turbulence in heavens and earth, human influence. Expulsion from heaven, temptation of humanity, establishment of hell. The parallels suggest archetypal patterns of rebellion, where ambition and pride confront established authority, often with far-reaching consequences. 8. Human involvement intensifies. As the rebellion escalated, human societies became more directly involved. Recipients of knowledge, Enki's allies continued to teach humans agriculture, metallurgy, writing, and governance. Unwitting instruments, humans may have been drafted into labor or conflict, shaping early civilizations to serve celestial agendas. Ethical testing, humanity became a reflection of divine struggle, forced to navigate morality, obedience, and autonomy. This involvement highlights a recurring motif: humanity is both affected by and reflective of divine conflict, demonstrating that celestial wars have terrestrial ramifications. 9. The role of pride and miscalculation. Central to the escalation was pride. Anunnaki pride, high-ranking gods overestimated their capacity to challenge supreme authority without consequence. Strategic errors, alliances shifted unpredictably, and some factions miscalculated human loyalty or cosmic reaction. Parallel in biblical narrative, Lucifer's pride and desire for sovereignty mirrors Enki and Inanna's ambition, suggesting a universal lesson about the dangers of hubris in positions of power. Pride, ambition, and miscalculation combine to create a volatile environment, making escalation inevitable. 10. Consequences for cosmic order. The escalation had lasting impacts. Divine authority, Anu's supremacy, was challenged, requiring eventual intervention or restructuring of hierarchy. Fragmentation, factionalism led to permanent divisions among the Anunnaki, some of which persisted in mythological records. Human civilization, humans inherited disrupted societies, technological knowledge, and cultural myths as a consequence of divine conflict. These consequences suggest that the rebellion was not only about power, but also about control of cosmic order and the regulation of knowledge. Aftermath, consequences of the Anunnaki rebellion on heaven and earth. In Part 4, we explored the climactic turning points of the Anunnaki rebellion, the battles, strategies, and pivotal moments that determined the conflict's trajectory. Part 5 focuses on the aftermath of the rebellion, examining the consequences for the Anunnaki, the reorganization of cosmic order, the fate of rebellious factions, and the enduring impact on human civilization. Through this discussion, we explore how myth, history, and morality intertwine in the story of rebellion. 1. The immediate consequences for the Anunnaki. The conclusion of the rebellion brought sweeping consequences for the celestial pantheon. Factional losses: many rebellious Anunnaki faced exile, demotion, or punishment. Leaders who challenged Anu's authority lost influence and sometimes presence in the heavenly hierarchy. Consolidation of authority: loyalists, particularly in Lil's faction, regained strategic control, solidifying a new balance of power among the gods. Long-term divisions: while the rebellion ended, divisions persisted. Some texts hint at ongoing tension between factions, influencing divine interactions with humans and each other. These outcomes demonstrate that even in victory, rebellion leaves lasting structural and relational scars, echoing lessons seen in later biblical accounts of Satan's fall. 2. Reorganization of cosmic order. The rebellion prompted significant changes to the cosmic order. Redefined hierarchy: authority among the Anunnaki became more centralized, with stricter control over knowledge, ritual, and influence. Territorial realignment: sacred domains in heaven and on earth were reassigned or fortified, reflecting a need to prevent future insurrection. Regulation of humanity: humans, as participants or beneficiaries of knowledge, were now more carefully managed. This may explain myths emphasizing obedience, labor, and divine law. This restructuring highlights that rebellion not only challenges authority but reshapes governance, law, and oversight, both celestial and terrestrial. 3. The fate of rebellious Anunnaki. The aftermath of rebellion was particularly harsh for those who actively opposed Anu. Exile and isolation: some were cast out from celestial realms, no longer able to exert influence openly. Loss of power and resources: control over technology, sacred sites, and human labor was restricted or revoked. Continued influence in secrecy: certain rebel leaders may have retained clandestine access to knowledge or human collaborators, influencing civilization subtly over time. The treatment of rebellious Anunnaki mirrors the biblical narrative: fall from grace, exile, and lingering influence despite defeat. 4. Consequences for humanity. Humans were profoundly affected by the rebellion's aftermath. Technological and cultural legacy: surviving rebel influence continued to provide selective knowledge, agriculture, metallurgy, writing, and governance systems. Societal disruption: civilizations experienced upheaval due to battles, natural disasters, and shifts in divine favor. Ethical lessons: myths encoded moral and ethical guidance, teaching obedience, prudence, and caution in dealing with power. This demonstrates a recurring theme: humanity absorbs the consequences of divine conflict, shaping both culture and morality. 5. Cosmic and ethical lessons. The Anunnaki rebellion illustrates several enduring lessons. Ambition has limits: even powerful beings must navigate authority, ethical constraints, and cosmic law. Rebellion carries cost: loss, exile, and disruption accompany the pursuit of autonomy against established order. Ethics and knowledge are linked: the rebellion highlights the danger of knowledge wielded without responsibility or moral guidance. Humanity reflects divine struggle: civilizations, technology, and moral frameworks are shaped by the outcome of cosmic conflict. These lessons echo in biblical traditions, reinforcing the universality of cautionary narratives about rebellion. 6. Reshaping of divine-human relations. After the rebellion, the relationship between the Anunnaki and humanity changed. Selective guidance: humans continued to receive instruction, but knowledge was often restricted or mediated by loyalist deities. Labor and service: human labor remained central to divine projects, particularly monumental construction and resource management. Cultural memory: myths, rituals, and ethics served as repositories of the rebellion's lessons, preserving collective memory for generations. The rebellion thus had a dual effect: advancing civilization while also reinforcing hierarchy and obedience. 7. Symbolic interpretations. The Anunnaki rebellion can be read symbolically as well as literally. Internal conflict: rebellion represents the struggle between ambition and obedience within intelligent beings, including humans. Moral allegory: pride, ethical divergence, and the consequences of overreach are central moral themes. Cosmic balance: the outcome underscores the importance of equilibrium, demonstrating that unchecked ambition disrupts harmony across realms. Symbolic reading allows myths to function as teaching tools, encoding cosmic, ethical, and practical lessons. 8. Parallels with Satan's fall. The aftermath closely mirrors biblical narratives. Aspect: Anunnaki rebellion, satanic fall, defeat and punishment, exile, loss of power, restricted influence, expulsion from heaven, restricted dominion, human consequences, civilization shaped, knowledge distributed selectively, temptation, moral testing, influence on human development, ethical lessons, pride punished, ambition checked, pride punished, free will tested, residual influence, rebel factions operate subtly, Satan and demons act on earth. Both narratives highlight the long-term impact of rebellion, illustrating that consequences extend beyond the immediate participants to humanity and cosmic order. 9. Factional memory and historical legacy. Even after the rebellion ended, memories of the conflict persisted. Mythology, stories of rebellion, exile, and cosmic battles shaped myths across Mesopotamia and neighboring cultures. Ritual practice, religious ceremonies encoded lessons from the rebellion, emphasizing obedience, piety, and moral vigilance. Cultural transmission, knowledge passed selectively to humanity reflected both rebellion and loyalty, influencing technology, governance, and culture. In this way, the rebellion's legacy became woven into the fabric of human civilization, shaping both spiritual and material development. 10. Ongoing influence and subtle intervention. Some scholars suggest that the influence of rebellious Anunnaki continued covertly. Guiding humanity, remaining rebels may have provided hidden knowledge, technological guidance, or inspiration for human innovation. Testing morality, humanity continued to serve as a stage for the moral and ethical consequences of rebellion. Cultural resonance, stories of divine conflict, temptation, and moral choice may reflect subtle ongoing influence in human consciousness. This perspective underscores the lasting resonance of rebellion across time, shaping both myth and human history. Questions arising from Part 5. The aftermath raises critical questions. How did selective knowledge transfer shape the trajectory of human civilization? Did rebellious factions retain covert influence on humanity, culture, and technology? How do these myths inform our understanding of authority, autonomy, and ethical responsibility? Can parallels between the Anunnaki rebellion and Satan's fall help us identify universal patterns in human understanding of cosmic morality? Exploring these questions bridges myth, morality, and historical speculation, providing insight into the enduring relevance of rebellion narratives. The aftermath of the Anunnaki rebellion demonstrates that rebellion has consequences far beyond immediate participants. The Anunnaki faced exile, punishment, and reorganization. Humans absorbed collateral effects, gaining knowledge selectively while enduring disruption. Cosmic order was reshaped, ethical lessons codified, and mythology preserved the memory of conflict for future generations. Parallels with the biblical fall of Satan reinforce universal themes. Ambition unchecked by ethical responsibility leads to loss, disruption, and moral teaching. In Part 6, we will explore the long-term consequences of the rebellion for both the Anunnaki and humanity, including the dispersal of divine influence, the impact on civilization, and the emergence of cultural memory that persists across millennia. Long-term consequences, legacy of the Anunnaki rebellion on civilization and divinity. In Part 5, we examined the immediate aftermath of the Anunnaki rebellion, the exile and punishment of rebel factions, the reorganization of cosmic order, and the consequences for humanity. Part 6 explores the long-term consequences of the rebellion, analyzing its enduring impact on divine hierarchies, human civilization, cultural memory, and ethical frameworks. This section also considers how these events might explain recurring themes in human myth, history, and spirituality. 1. Fragmentation and reorganization among the Anunnaki. The rebellion reshaped the structure of the divine pantheon. Hierarchy stabilization. Following the conflict, Anu and loyalists reasserted authority, but the balance of power shifted to account for weakened or exiled factions. Residual factions. Some rebellious Anunnaki retained limited influence, operating subtly in human affairs or through secret alliances. New roles, certain deities were reassigned domains, reflecting both punishment and attempts to prevent future insurrections. This restructuring illustrates that rebellion leaves lasting traces, reshaping not only power but relationships, responsibilities, and cosmic governance. 2. Ethical and moral lessons for divinity. The rebellion reinforced several enduring ethical lessons among the Anunnaki. Pride as vulnerability, high-ranking beings learned that ambition unchecked by responsibility could lead to downfall. Authority requires legitimacy, centralized power was necessary to maintain order, but it could not ignore dissent entirely. Justice and consequence, punishment for rebellion reinforced a sense of cosmic justice, illustrating that actions, even divine ones, carry consequences. These lessons mirror human moral frameworks, suggesting that myths encode guidance for both celestial and mortal realms. 3. Human civilization and the rebellion's legacy. Humans experienced profound and lasting impacts from the rebellion. Technological advancement, select knowledge transferred by sympathetic Anunnaki enabled agriculture, writing, metallurgy, and architecture. Societal organization, labor systems, governance structures, and religious hierarchies reflected divine influence, balancing autonomy with obedience. Ethical memory, myths of rebellion, pride, and punishment shaped human ethics, law, and cultural norms for generations. Humans, though often powerless to influence divine conflict directly, became repositories of its lessons and beneficiaries of its knowledge. 4. The persistence of rebel influence. Despite defeat, the influence of rebellious Anunnaki persisted. Covert guidance, some factions continued to guide humanity subtly, transmitting knowledge, innovation, and cultural inspiration. Testing humanity, their actions allowed humans to navigate ethical dilemmas, mirroring the broader struggle between order and autonomy. Cultural echoes, legends, myths, and rituals encode the rebellion's memory, ensuring its lessons endure. This subtle ongoing influence demonstrates that even in exile, rebellion leaves a lasting imprint, both on divine structures and human society. 5. Parallels with biblical and other religious narratives. The aftermath of the Anunnaki rebellion parallels several key aspects of biblical and other mythological accounts. Aspect: Anunnaki rebellion. Biblical and global parallels. Fallen leaders. Rebel Anunnaki exiled, demoted, or marginalized. Satan and fallen angels expelled from heaven. Human consequences. Select knowledge, societal disruption, ethical instruction. Knowledge, temptation, moral testing of humans. Moral lessons. Pride punished, authority reinforced, ethical frameworks established. Sin, obedience, free will, and divine justice. Cultural transmission. Myths, rituals, and legends encode rebellion's memory. These parallels suggest archetypal patterns in how humans interpret rebellion, ethics, and cosmic order. 6. The role of knowledge and technology. One of the most significant long-term consequences of the rebellion was the distribution of knowledge. Selective transmission, sympathetic Anunnaki, particularly Enki, shared knowledge with humans in controlled ways. Technological foundations, agriculture, metallurgy, architecture, and astronomy reflect both divine instruction and human adaptation. Ethical responsibility, humans were expected to use this knowledge wisely, introducing the concept of accountability in the use of power. Knowledge thus became both a reward and a test, shaping civilization and moral development simultaneously. 7. Human ethical and cultural evolution. The rebellion's aftermath influenced human culture in profound ways. Religious systems, temples, priesthoods, and sacred rituals codified lessons about obedience, pride, and moral responsibility. Moral codes, ethical guidelines regarding authority, ambition, and cooperation may have been inspired by celestial conflict. Cultural memory, myths of cosmic rebellion, flood, or divine punishment became central narratives, providing both explanation and warning. Humans thus absorbed the rebellion's ethical and cultural lessons, internalizing them in ways that persisted across generations. 8. Factional influence and mythological legacy. The rebellion created enduring divisions that influence myth. Sympathetic factions, Enki's allies, became cultural heroes associated with wisdom, knowledge, and human advancement. Loyalist factions, Enlil's allies, emphasized obedience, order, and authority. Narrative duality, myths often depict cosmic struggle as a balance between order and innovation, obedience and ambition. These divisions suggest that mythology encodes both the memory of rebellion and the lessons derived from it, offering insights into cosmic, social, and ethical dynamics. 9. Cosmic and terrestrial stability. Post-rebellion, the cosmos and human society required stabilization. Divine oversight, loyalist Anunnaki maintained control over sacred sites, technology, and human labor systems. Human governance, humans implemented structured civilizations with hierarchical order, reflecting lessons of rebellion and its consequences. Ethical reinforcement, rituals, laws, and myth reinforced the moral lessons derived from cosmic conflict. This stabilization demonstrates that rebellion, though disruptive, leads to eventual reorganization and learning, for both divine and human realms. 10. Lessons on authority, ambition, and autonomy. The long-term consequences of the rebellion offer enduring insights. Authority must be balanced, centralized control is necessary, but dissent and autonomy cannot be ignored. Ambition requires ethics, power and knowledge must be tempered with responsibility to avoid conflict and loss. Ethical memory shapes culture, humans internalize the lessons of cosmic conflict through myths, rituals, and social structures. Rebellion leaves enduring impact, even defeated rebels can influence culture, technology, and ethics for generations. These lessons are universal, reflecting the recurrence of similar narratives across civilizations. 11. Questions arising from Part 6. The long-term consequences raise critical questions. How did surviving rebel influence shape human technology, ethics, and governance over millennia? Can cultural memory of rebellion explain recurring themes of pride, ambition, and punishment across religions? How do humans internalize lessons from rebellion narratives, both consciously and subconsciously? Did the Anunnaki rebellion set a precedent for future conflicts between authority and autonomy, divine or human? Exploring these questions helps us understand the enduring resonance of rebellion narratives in shaping human thought and civilization. The long-term consequences of the Anunnaki rebellion illustrate that rebellion is not confined to immediate battles or punishments. Exiled factions, stabilized hierarchies, selective transmission of knowledge, and cultural memory all contributed to shaping both divine order and human civilization. Humans absorbed lessons on ethics, authority, and responsibility, codified in myths, rituals, and social systems. Parallels with the biblical fall of Satan reinforce universal themes. Unchecked pride leads to downfall, rebellion reshapes order, and ethical responsibility is essential for the use of knowledge and power. In Part 7, we will explore the dispersal of the Anunnaki across Earth and beyond, their continued influence on civilizations, and the way the memory of the rebellion shaped history, culture, and spirituality over millennia. Dispersal and enduring influence, the Anunnaki after the rebellion. In Part 6, we examined the long-term consequences of the Anunnaki rebellion, including the restructuring of divine hierarchies, the selective transmission of knowledge to humanity, and the ethical lessons encoded in culture and myth. Part 7 explores the dispersal of the Anunnaki across Earth and potentially beyond, their subtle influence on human civilizations, and how the memory of the rebellion continued to shape spirituality, governance, and knowledge across millennia. 1. Exile and dispersal of rebellious factions. After the rebellion, defeated Anunnaki factions faced exile or marginalization. Celestial exile, some rebel Anunnaki were removed from primary heavenly domains, losing overt authority and power. Earthly deployment, certain factions were sent to Earth, either as punishment or to continue indirect guidance of humanity. Secret networks, these groups retained covert influence, often operating through humans or isolated settlements. The dispersal illustrates that defeat did not equate to total annihilation, but rather a shift from overt to subtle influence. 2. Strategic settlement across Earth. Textual and mythological records suggest that surviving Anunnaki established strategic presences across human civilizations. Mesopotamia and Sumer, considered the heart of Anunnaki activity, this region became a center for learning, technology, and temple construction. Egypt and the Nile Valley, some factions influenced architectural knowledge, governance systems, and religious ritual. Other regions, oral traditions and archaeological hints suggest influence in Anatolia, the Indus Valley, and the Levant, reflecting strategic positioning to oversee human development. By dispersing across civilizations, the Anunnaki ensured that their influence persisted, even after losing centralized control. 3. The subtle guidance of humanity. The dispersal of the Anunnaki allowed them to continue shaping human civilization subtly. Knowledge transmission, agricultural techniques, metallurgy, astronomy, and writing systems were shared selectively. Social organization, hierarchical structures, religious rituals, and law codes reflect divine influence aimed at stabilizing societies. Ethical and cultural lessons, myths and stories encoded principles of morality, obedience, and ambition, reflecting the lessons of rebellion. Humans became both recipients and transmitters of knowledge, preserving the ethical and technological legacy of the Anunnaki across generations. 4. Cultural memory and mythology. The memory of the rebellion persisted in myths and rituals. Epic narratives, Sumerian epics, such as the Enuma Elish and the Epic of Gilgamesh, reference divine conflict, human guidance, and the consequences of hubris. Religious rituals, temples and priesthoods enacted rituals reflecting loyalty, obedience, and remembrance of divine lessons. Symbolic representation, the duality of order versus rebellion became a recurring motif in mythology, mirrored in stories worldwide. Through myth, the rebellion was preserved as both historical memory and ethical teaching, influencing spiritual and cultural evolution. 5. Parallels with biblical and other traditions. The post-rebellion dispersal echoes narratives found in other traditions. Theme: Anunnaki dispersal. Biblical other traditions. Fallen figures. Exiled rebel Anunnaki influence humanity. Satan and fallen angels influence humans. Knowledge and guidance. Selective transmission of technology and wisdom. Serpent in Eden, Prometheus myths. Moral lessons. Stories encode obedience, ambition, and consequence. Biblical narratives, moral parables, and mythological epics. Cultural memory. Myths preserved rebellion and its consequences. Oral traditions, scripture, and global mythologies. These parallels suggest that the Anunnaki rebellion served as a prototype for understanding divine-human interaction, rebellion, and moral consequence. 6. Influence on governance and civilization. The Anunnaki dispersal had practical consequences for human governance. Hierarchical structures, kingship, priesthoods, and councils reflect the influence of Anunnaki organization. Law and order, codified laws, often linked to divine authority, reinforced obedience and stability. Monumental architecture, ziggurats, pyramids, and temples may reflect both technological guidance and ideological symbolism. Human civilization was thus both shaped and stabilized by the lingering presence of dispersed Anunnaki factions. 7. Technology and knowledge across cultures. Dispersed Anunnaki also facilitated the spread of technology and innovation. Agriculture and irrigation, techniques introduced in Mesopotamia spread to neighboring regions, sustaining population growth. Metallurgy, knowledge of bronze and later iron tools facilitated societal advancement and conflict. Writing and record-keeping, cuneiform, hieroglyphics, and other early scripts preserved knowledge and myth for future generations. These technological transfers demonstrate that even defeated rebels can leave enduring legacies, shaping human progress indirectly. 8. Moral and ethical lessons encoded in culture. The rebellion's ethical lessons became central to human cultural memory. Obedience versus autonomy, stories emphasized the consequences of challenging authority recklessly. Pride and ambition, myths warned against overreach, reflecting lessons learned by both gods and humans. Responsibility with knowledge, humans were expected to use knowledge wisely, paralleling divine expectations. By encoding ethical lessons in culture, the rebellion continues to influence moral understanding across generations. 9. Ongoing conflict and subtle intervention. Even in dispersal, tensions persisted among the Anunnaki. Subtle rivalries, exiled factions occasionally clashed in indirect ways, influencing human societies or technological development. Testing humanity, humans remained a stage for testing ethical and social frameworks, as divine influence continued to shape outcomes. Mythical reflection, stories of gods, angels, and demigods may reflect these subtle interventions, blending history, myth, and morality. The rebellion thus did not end entirely, its legacy persisted through indirect influence and narrative memory. 10. Lessons from Part 7. The dispersal of the Anunnaki after the rebellion highlights several key insights. Defeat does not erase influence, even exiled factions can shape culture, technology, and ethics. Knowledge as legacy, technology, writing, and societal structures endure as markers of divine interaction. Myth as memory, myths preserve both historical events and ethical lessons, guiding human behavior across generations. Rebellion as archetype, patterns of conflict, ambition, and consequence recur in human understanding of morality and governance. These lessons reinforce the enduring relevance of the Anunnaki rebellion in understanding both ancient myth and human civilization. 11. Questions arising from Part 7. The dispersal raises important questions. How did the scattered influence of rebellious Anunnaki shape the development of early civilizations? To what extent do myths and rituals encode memories of rebellion versus purely symbolic lessons? How do technology and knowledge serve as instruments of both influence and ethical responsibility? Can we trace parallels between Anunnaki dispersal and other global narratives of divine conflict? Exploring these questions helps contextualize the rebellion's long-term impact on humanity and culture. The dispersal of the Anunnaki following the rebellion illustrates that defeat does not eliminate influence. Exiled factions continue to guide, challenge, and test human societies, transferring knowledge, technology, and ethical frameworks. Myths and rituals preserve the memory of rebellion, encoding lessons about pride, ambition, and responsibility. Parallels with biblical and other traditions highlight universal themes of cosmic conflict and moral consequence. In Part 8, we will examine the interactions between dispersed Anunnaki factions, the subtle rivalries that continued to shape human history, and the ways in which the rebellion's memory influenced the development of civilization over millennia. Factional rivalries and the shaping of human history. In Part 7, we explored the dispersal of the Anunnaki after the rebellion, their subtle guidance of human civilizations, and the preservation of the rebellion's memory through myth, ritual, and culture. Part 8 focuses on the continuing interactions and rivalries among the dispersed Anunnaki factions, examining how these subtle conflicts influenced human history, politics, technological development, and spiritual narratives over millennia. 1. Persistent factionalism among the Anunnaki. Despite the apparent resolution of the rebellion, divisions persisted. Rebel versus loyalist dynamics, exiled factions maintained loyalty to Enki, Inanna, or other leaders, while loyalist factions upheld Enlil's authority. Covert influence, these rival factions interacted indirectly through human proxies, competing for influence over civilizations and key leaders. Strategic subtlety, open conflict became rare. Instead, factions engaged in manipulation, knowledge distribution, and influence campaigns, reflecting the high stakes of indirect governance. This ongoing factionalism suggests that the rebellion was not a singular event but a long-term process of ideological and strategic tension. 2. Impact on human civilization. Factional rivalries among the Anunnaki had tangible consequences for humanity. Political structures, city-states, kingdoms, and empires often reflected the strategic interests of one faction or another. Religious institutions, priesthoods and temples sometimes aligned with specific divine agendas, subtly favoring either rebel or loyalist perspectives. Technological innovation, advances in metallurgy, construction, and navigation were influenced by the knowledge shared by sympathetic factions. Humans thus became unwitting participants in a continuing cosmic power struggle, shaping civilization while being shaped by it. 3. Knowledge as a tool of influence. Knowledge and technology were the primary means by which factions extended their influence. Selective transmission, certain factions chose when and to whom to reveal advanced knowledge, testing ethical behavior and loyalty. Technological gifts, innovations in agriculture, irrigation, construction, and astronomy were strategically distributed to secure favor or control. Cultural engineering, by guiding education, ritual, and societal norms, factions reinforced their preferred values and power structures. This strategic use of knowledge demonstrates that intellectual and technological influence was as powerful as physical or celestial might. 4. The role of myth and narrative. Myths continue to serve as a battleground for Anunnaki influence. Storytelling as guidance, epic tales, such as the Epic of Gilgamesh, encoded moral, ethical, and technological lessons reflecting factional agendas. Symbolic representation, heroes, gods, and monsters represented rival factions and their influence over humanity. Cultural transmission, oral and written traditions ensured the rebellion's memory persisted, reinforcing factional narratives over generations. By shaping narrative, the Anunnaki maintained influence without direct intervention, embedding guidance in culture. 5. Political manipulation and civilization building. Factional rivalries also manifested in political strategy. City-state favoritism, certain city-states received greater technological or architectural knowledge depending on their alignment with a faction. Dynastic guidance, royal lineages were subtly guided or manipulated to uphold factional agendas. Intercivilizational competition, rivalries between civilizations may have reflected the underlying contest between Anunnaki factions. This suggests that human politics and warfare may be indirectly informed by cosmic power struggles, providing a framework for understanding historical patterns. 6. Ethical and moral testing of humanity. Factional rivalries functioned as a moral experiment for humans. Testing obedience, humans were encouraged to navigate loyalty and ethical decision-making. Pride and hubris, access to advanced knowledge tested the ethical capacity of civilizations to wield power responsibly. Reward and punishment, success and failure often reflected alignment with divine guidance, reinforcing the moral lessons of the rebellion. Through these interactions, humanity became an arena for understanding autonomy, ethics, and responsibility, echoing biblical themes of testing and temptation. 7. Parallels with satanic fall and continuing influence. The continuing factional rivalries mirror the biblical narrative. Aspect: Anunnaki factions. Biblical parallels. Exiled influence. Rebel factions continue to shape humans. Satan and demons influence humans post-expulsion. Moral testing. Knowledge and guidance as ethical tests. Temptation and moral challenges in Genesis and elsewhere. Indirect conflict. Subtle manipulation and rivalry. Spiritual warfare described in Scripture. Cultural legacy. Myths, rituals, technology shaped by factions. Stories, rituals, and laws reflect angelic and demonic influence. These parallels reinforce the universality of rebellion and post-rebellion influence across cultures. 8. Technological and cultural diffusion. Factional rivalry contributed to technological and cultural diffusion. Agriculture and infrastructure, irrigation, crop rotation, and city planning spread across regions through selective guidance. Architecture and monumental construction, ziggurats, pyramids, and temples reflect both technological knowledge and symbolic assertions of power. Writing and record-keeping, cuneiform, hieroglyphics, and proto-writing systems preserved knowledge and ethical teachings across generations. Such diffusion demonstrates that the rebellion's consequences extended far beyond the immediate battle, shaping the trajectory of human development. 9. Strategic lessons from factional rivalry. The rivalry between Anunnaki factions highlights several strategic principles. Indirect influence is powerful. Factions achieved lasting impact through guidance rather than direct confrontation. Knowledge as control, the strategic use of technology and wisdom influenced societal organization and loyalty. Ethics as a mechanism, ethical testing reinforced both divine and human order. Cultural memory, embedding lessons in myth ensured persistence across generations. These principles suggest that success in rebellion is not only measured by victory or defeat but by lasting influence and legacy. 10. Human societal evolution under divine rivalry. Human societies evolved under the subtle influence of competing factions. Legal codes, early laws, such as the Code of Hammurabi, reflect divine guidance and ethical reinforcement. Religious doctrine, temples, rituals, and priesthoods codified lessons learned from rebellion and factional conflict. Civilizational patterns, the rise and fall of city-states, empires, and civilizations may correlate with alignment to particular factions. This demonstrates that the Anunnaki rebellion and its aftermath directly shaped the trajectory of human history, influencing governance, culture, and spiritual understanding. 11. Questions arising from Part 8. The continued factional influence raises key questions. To what extent did factional rivalry determine the success or failure of early civilizations? How did the ethical and technological guidance of competing factions shape human morality and governance? Can myths and epics be read as coded accounts of ongoing divine rivalry? How do these subtle interactions reflect universal themes of power, influence, and legacy? Exploring these questions deepens understanding of the long-term consequences of rebellion on both divine and human spheres. The subtle rivalries among dispersed Anunnaki factions illustrate that rebellion's impact extends far beyond immediate battles. Through selective guidance, technological transmission, political influence, and myth-making, these factions continue to shape human history, morality, and civilization. Ethical testing, cultural diffusion, and the preservation of rebellion's memory ensured that lessons learned from the conflict endured. Parallels with biblical accounts of Satan's fall highlight the universal themes of ambition, pride, and post-rebellion influence. In Part 9, we will explore the culmination of Anunnaki influence in shaping global civilization, examining key historical events, technological leaps, and cultural developments that reflect the enduring legacy of factional rivalry and divine intervention. Culmination of influence, Anunnaki legacy in human civilization. In Part 8, we explored the continuing rivalries among dispersed Anunnaki factions and their subtle influence on human civilizations. Part 9 focuses on the culmination of their impact, examining how these divine interactions shaped global civilization, technological progress, governance, and culture. We analyze how the memory and guidance of the Anunnaki continued to influence humanity, embedding lessons from the rebellion into the fabric of history. 1. Consolidation of civilizations under Anunnaki guidance. After dispersal and factional rivalry, certain human civilizations rose under the influence of specific Anunnaki factions. Mesopotamia, Sumerian city-states benefited from technological and organizational guidance, including irrigation systems, urban planning, and legal codes. Egypt, the knowledge of architecture, astronomy, and religion was shaped by Anunnaki guidance, producing monumental structures and enduring spiritual frameworks. Indus Valley, innovations in urban planning, water management, and social organization suggest subtle divine influence. Other regions, early civilizations in Anatolia, Persia, and the Levant show similar patterns of structured governance and technological advancement. This distribution highlights that Anunnaki influence was selective, strategic, and enduring, allowing civilizations to flourish while embedding ethical lessons. 2. Technological advancements and knowledge transfer. The transfer of knowledge remained central to Anunnaki influence. Agriculture and irrigation, innovation supported population growth and urbanization, allowing stable, complex societies to emerge. Metallurgy and tool-making, advances in bronze and later iron technology facilitated societal development, military strength, and infrastructure. Astronomy and timekeeping, celestial observation-guided calendars, rituals, and agricultural cycles. 3. Governance and law as reflections of factional influence. Anunnaki involvement also influenced political systems. Divine kingship, rulers often claim divine sanction, reflecting alignment with specific Anunnaki factions. Legal systems, laws codified morality, hierarchy, and justice, reflecting both rebellion's lessons and factional agendas. Social structure, labor, tribute, and priesthood hierarchies reinforced both human and divine order, demonstrating indirect oversight. Human governance thus became a mirror of divine order, with factional influence guiding development while reinforcing cosmic lessons. 4. Religion, myth, and cultural memory. The legacy of rebellion was preserved through cultural expression. Mythology, epic narratives encoded the struggle between loyalty and rebellion, authority and ambition. Religious rituals, temple practices reinforced obedience, ethical behavior, and memory of divine intervention. Cultural transmission, oral tradition and written records ensured the persistence of rebellion's moral lessons across generations. These practices highlight how myth and ritual serve as repositories of historical memory and ethical guidance. 5. Factional rivalries and human conflict. Rivalries among Anunnaki factions occasionally manifested in human conflicts. Intercity and inter-empire wars, disputes between city-states or empires may reflect factional influence and competition. Political intrigue, dynastic struggles, coups, and governance disputes could have been guided by subtle Anunnaki intervention. Technological advantage, certain civilizations gained advantages through selective knowledge transfer, influencing power dynamics. This suggests that human history may carry echoes of divine rivalry, shaping both cooperation and conflict. 6. Ethical implications of knowledge and power. The Anunnaki rebellion and subsequent influence illustrate the ethical dimensions of knowledge. Responsibility in use, humans were tested on how they wielded technological and spiritual guidance. Moral lessons, pride, ambition, obedience, and ethical judgment remain central themes. Reward and consequence, societies prospered when knowledge was applied wisely, and suffered when hubris or mismanagement prevailed. This framework demonstrates that the rebellion's legacy extended beyond divine conflict into human ethical development. 7. Integration with biblical and global narratives. The influence of Anunnaki factions aligns with universal themes. Aspect: Anunnaki legacy. Biblical global parallel. Testing humans. Select knowledge and guidance. Edenic temptation, moral testing. Civilization building. Cities, agriculture, law. Early biblical settlements, divine provision. Ethical framework. Lessons on pride, ambition, and obedience. 10 Commandments, moral parables. Cultural memory. Myths and rituals encode divine lessons. Genesis, Psalms, epics worldwide. These parallels suggest that the rebellion and its aftermath provided a template for understanding morality, governance, and divine human interaction across cultures. 8. Monumental architecture as a symbol of influence. Architecture served as both technological achievement and ideological statement. Ziggurats and temples represented the connection between humans and the divine, often aligned with celestial observation. Pyramids reflected sophisticated knowledge of mathematics, astronomy, and labor organization. City planning, streets, canals, and defensive structures showcase strategic guidance and social order. Monumental structures thus became physical manifestations of Anunnaki influence, knowledge, and authority, preserving lessons for posterity. 9. Knowledge preservation and the role of writing. Writing and record-keeping ensured the continuity of divine influence. Cuneiform tablets recorded lore, mythology, and astronomical knowledge. Hieroglyphics preserved religious and cultural narratives for future generations. Oral tradition complemented written records, ensuring transmission of ethical and technological lessons. Through these means, humans became active participants in preserving and transmitting the memory of rebellion, bridging cosmic events and historical development. 10. Legacy in human ethical consciousness. The rebellion's influence shaped ethical consciousness across civilizations. Obedience and hierarchy, societies learned the consequences of disobedience and rebellion. Ambition and responsibility, ethical stories warned against unbridled pride and unchecked ambition. Integration of knowledge and morality, humans learned to link technological and spiritual knowledge with ethical practice. The rebellion, therefore, left a lasting imprint on human morality, law, and societal organization, influencing civilizations across millennia. 11. Questions arising from Part 9. As the Anunnaki legacy culminates in human civilization, several questions emerge. How did factional influence shape the success or failure of early civilizations? Can monumental architecture and writing systems be interpreted as markers of divine guidance? To what extent did myth and ritual preserve the ethical lessons of rebellion? How do these patterns inform our understanding of the universal human experience of morality, ambition, and obedience? These questions set the stage for examining the final centuries of Anunnaki influence and the full integration of rebellion lessons into human culture in Part 10. The culmination of Anunnaki influence demonstrates that the rebellion's legacy extended far beyond celestial battles. Through selective knowledge transfer, guidance of political and technological development, and preservation of ethical lessons in myth and ritual, the Anunnaki shaped the trajectory of human civilization. Human society became both a reflection of divine struggle and a testing ground for moral and ethical principles. Monumental architecture, written records, and governance systems reveal the enduring presence of the rebellion's lessons. In Part 10, we will explore the final stages of Anunnaki influence, the fading of overt divine intervention, and how humanity carried the rebellion's lessons forward into recorded history and global culture. The decline of direct influence, Anunnaki legacy in recorded history. In Part 9, we explored the culmination of Anunnaki influence on human civilization, from technological innovation and governance to ethical lessons and monumental architecture. Part 10 focuses on the gradual decline of direct Anunnaki intervention, examining how humanity absorbed their influence, continued to develop independently, and preserved the memory of rebellion through myth, culture, and religious narrative. This stage marks the transition from overt guidance to subtle legacy. 1. The gradual withdrawal of the Anunnaki. After centuries of guiding and testing humanity, exodus from direct rule, many Anunnaki withdrew from active governance, allowing humans to exercise greater autonomy. Delegated influence, remaining interactions were mediated through priests, scribes, and kings who acted as human proxies. Strategic observation, the Anunnaki continued to observe and occasionally intervene in critical moments, ensuring that moral and technological lessons were preserved. This withdrawal allowed humanity to internalize lessons from the rebellion, fostering independent development while retaining ethical frameworks. 2. Civilization adapts and expands. With the decline of direct guidance, independent governance, humans consolidated political and legal systems, forming empires such as Akkad, Babylon, and later Egypt and Persia. Technological advancement, innovations in agriculture, metallurgy, navigation, and construction accelerated under human ingenuity, though still influenced by earlier Anunnaki guidance. Cultural flourishing, literature, philosophy, and art flourished, often drawing inspiration from mythological narratives and ethical teachings inherited from the rebellion. Humanity thus became co-creators of civilization, building upon the foundations laid by Anunnaki influence while navigating moral responsibility independently. 3. Ethical lessons embedded in society. The ethical dimensions of the rebellion were preserved in societal norms. Obedience and authority, civilizations codified rules to balance individual ambition with communal stability. Pride and hubris, myths warned of the consequences of excessive ambition, reinforcing humility and ethical decision-making. Knowledge as responsibility, humans were expected to wield science, technology, and cultural influence with accountability, reflecting Anunnaki guidance. These lessons show how the moral consequences of rebellion were internalized into human society, influencing decision-making and governance. 4. Mythology and cultural memory. Even as direct interaction declined, the memory of the rebellion persisted. Epic narratives, texts like the Epic of Gilgamesh, the Enuma Elish, and other Mesopotamian stories encoded the lessons of pride, loyalty, and consequence. Religious traditions, rituals, temple hierarchies, and priesthoods maintained ethical and spiritual frameworks reflective of Anunnaki influence. Global resonance, parallels appear in biblical texts, Greek myths, and other cultural narratives, demonstrating the universality of rebellion as a moral and historical template. Through mythology, humanity preserved both memory and moral instruction, bridging divine history and human development. 5. The fading of celestial visibility. Over time, Anunnaki became less overtly visible. Symbolic presence, they were increasingly understood as mythological or symbolic figures rather than literal actors. Focus on human agency, humans took greater responsibility for social, technological, and spiritual advancement. Ritual as proxy, temple rites, offerings, and religious observances became the primary interface between humans and Anunnaki memory. This transition illustrates that the ultimate goal of guidance may have been to empower humanity, preparing humans to act with autonomy while retaining ethical lessons. 6. Continued influence through knowledge and architecture. Even in decline, the Anunnaki left indelible marks. Monumental structures, ziggurats, pyramids, and urban planning reflected earlier guidance and reinforced societal organization. Written records, cuneiform, hieroglyphics, and codified laws preserved technological, administrative, and moral knowledge. Technological legacy, agriculture, irrigation, metallurgy, and astronomy continued to drive human advancement. These contributions demonstrate that influence does not require physical presence, and legacy can persist through systems, knowledge, and culture. 7. Parallels with Satan's fall and moral testing. The fading of direct influence mirrors the biblical narrative of Satan's fall. Aspect: Anunnaki legacy. Biblical parallel. Withdrawal from direct control. Humans gain autonomy. God allows humans to exercise free will post-satanic fall. Ethical testing. Responsibility with knowledge and power. Temptation and moral choice in Eden and beyond. Cultural transmission. Myths, rituals, and records encode lessons. Scripture and oral tradition preserve moral instruction. Ongoing influence. Subtle guidance and observation. Satan and angels continue to influence human morality. Both narratives highlight the long-term moral consequences of rebellion and the transition from divine oversight to human responsibility. 8. Integration into historical consciousness. The lessons of the rebellion were integrated into human history. Historical memory, civilizations recorded successes and failures, attributing them to divine favor or wrath. Ethical governance, kings, judges, and religious leaders reinforce lessons from the rebellion in political and legal frameworks. Cultural continuity, stories of divine conflict, rebellion, and human responsibility persisted across centuries, shaping collective consciousness. Through this integration, the memory of the rebellion became part of humanity's ethical and cultural foundation. 9. The enduring legacy in global culture. Even as direct influence faded, ethical frameworks, humanity retained the central moral lessons of ambition, obedience, and responsibility. Cultural expression, literature, art, religion, and architecture reflected Anunnaki teachings and rebellion narratives. Spiritual reflection, humanity continued to grapple with questions of power, pride, and cosmic order, echoing the rebellion's themes across time. The rebellion thus shaped not only civilization but the very consciousness and moral imagination of humanity. 10. Questions arising from Part 10. The decline of direct Anunnaki influence raises critical questions. How did humanity internalize lessons of rebellion into societal structures and personal ethics? To what extent do myths preserve memory versus providing symbolic moral guidance? How does the fading of divine oversight influence human autonomy and innovation? Can patterns of rebellion and moral testing inform contemporary understanding of leadership and responsibility? These questions prepare us to consider the final synthesis of the rebellion's impact, the culmination of Anunnaki influence, and its reflection in global history in Part 11. As direct Anunnaki involvement waned, humanity absorbed the legacy of rebellion, guidance, and moral testing. Knowledge, technology, governance, and ethical frameworks were internalized, ensuring that lessons of pride, ambition, and responsibility endured. Myths, rituals, and monumental architecture preserved memory, guiding successive civilizations. Parallels with biblical and global narratives underscore universal themes of rebellion, consequence, and the ethical exercise of knowledge and power. In Part 11, we will conclude the documentary by examining the complete legacy of the Anunnaki rebellion, its enduring imprint on humanity, and how understanding this ancient conflict informs our perception of morality, civilization, and the human-divine relationship. The enduring legacy, lessons from the Anunnaki rebellion. In Part 10, we explored the gradual decline of direct Anunnaki influence, the integration of their guidance into human civilization, and the preservation of rebellion lessons through myth, ritual, governance, and cultural memory. Part 11 synthesizes the entire narrative, examining the enduring legacy of the Anunnaki rebellion, its moral and cultural implications, and the lessons humanity continues to derive from this ancient cosmic conflict. 1. Rebellion as a catalyst for change. The Anunnaki rebellion was not merely a clash of celestial beings, it served as a catalyst for transformation. Divine lessons, pride, ambition, and disobedience were met with consequences, reinforcing cosmic ethical order. Human development, rebellion indirectly shaped human civilization by determining how knowledge, technology, and governance would be transmitted. Long-term influence, even in exile, rebel factions influenced humanity, demonstrating that rebellion leaves enduring effects beyond immediate battles. The rebellion illustrates that conflict, while destructive, often drives growth, innovation, and reflection, both divine and human. 2. Ethical and moral implications. The rebellion provided enduring moral lessons for humans and perhaps for divine actors themselves. Ambition versus responsibility. Ambition must be tempered by ethical responsibility to prevent destructive consequences. Obedience versus autonomy. Authority requires legitimacy, but freedom and choice remain essential for growth. Knowledge as power and test. The distribution and use of knowledge function as both a reward and a challenge, testing moral judgment. These lessons resonate with biblical narratives, mythological epics, and philosophical traditions, reinforcing their universality. 3. Human civilization as reflection of cosmic struggle. Human history became a canvas on which the consequences of the rebellion were reflected. Governance and law, systems of kingship, law codes, and social hierarchy were influenced by divine guidance and ethical testing. Technology and architecture, monumental structures and urban planning encoded lessons about order, organization, and divine alignment. Cultural narratives, myths and religious rituals preserved the memory of rebellion, serving as moral instruction and historical reflection. This suggests that human civilization mirrors cosmic conflict, with ethical choices, societal organization, and knowledge serving as reflections of divine dynamics. 4. Preservation through myth and ritual. Mythology and ritual functioned as tools to preserve the rebellion's memory. Epic narratives, stories like the Epic of Gilgamesh and the Enuma Elish encode the consequences of pride, rebellion, and moral responsibility. Religious practice, temples, sacrifices, and priesthoods maintained ethical and spiritual frameworks, providing structured interaction with divine memory. Cultural continuity, through writing, oral tradition, and ritual, lessons of rebellion were transmitted across generations and geographies. Even after direct Anunnaki presence faded, myths ensured that the rebellion's moral and ethical lessons endured. 5. Parallels with biblical accounts. The Anunnaki rebellion parallels biblical and other global narratives. Aspect: Anunnaki rebellion. Biblical parallel. Fall of divine beings. Rebel Anunnaki exiled or punished. Satan and fallen angels expelled from heaven. Moral testing of humans. Knowledge and guidance as ethical tests. Edenic temptation, trials of humanity. Cultural preservation. Myths, rituals, architecture. Scripture, parables, oral traditions. Lasting legacy. Influence continues indirectly. Spiritual influence, moral lessons passed to humanity. These parallels highlight that archetypal narratives of rebellion, pride, and divine human interaction recur universally, pointing to shared human understanding of morality and consequence. 6. The role of knowledge and innovation. Knowledge served as both a gift and a test. Technological advancement, agriculture, metallurgy, architecture, and astronomy shaped civilizations. Moral responsibility, humans were tested on how they applied these gifts, balancing innovation with ethical use. Cultural integration, writing, rituals, and education ensured that knowledge carried both practical and moral guidance. The Anunnaki rebellion demonstrates that knowledge is inseparable from ethical responsibility, a principle echoed in global human history. 7. Subtle guidance and indirect influence. Even after withdrawal, the Anunnaki continued to influence humanity. Factional rivalries, subtle competition among exiled factions shaped human civilizations indirectly. Ethical testing, humans were presented with choices reflecting pride, obedience, ambition, and morality. Cultural and historical memory, myths, monumental architecture, and religious rituals preserved lessons without requiring physical presence. This illustrates that lasting influence often depends more on subtlety and integration than direct power. 8. The universality of rebellion themes. Across civilizations and millennia, the themes of the Anunnaki rebellion persist. Cosmic conflict, struggles between order and rebellion, loyalty and ambition appear repeatedly in myth and scripture. Moral testing, ethical dilemmas and consequences recur, from the earliest civilizations to modern religious thought. Cultural memory, art, architecture, ritual, and narrative encode universal lessons, reflecting humanity's ongoing engagement with rebellion, morality, and responsibility. The rebellion therefore provides a lens through which to understand human history and moral consciousness. 9. Human autonomy and evolution. Ultimately, the rebellion facilitated human growth. Autonomy, withdrawal of direct Anunnaki guidance, forced humans to exercise judgment, innovation, and leadership. Ethical maturity, humanity learned to navigate moral complexities, balancing ambition and responsibility. Civilizational resilience, humans built enduring systems of law, governance, and culture, integrating lessons from rebellion into practical life. The Anunnaki rebellion thus served as a transformative experiment in responsibility, choice, and civilization building. 10. Questions for reflection. The rebellion leaves humanity with enduring questions. How do stories of rebellion and consequence shape moral and ethical decision-making across cultures? In what ways do knowledge and power test humanity's responsibility? How can understanding ancient conflicts like the Anunnaki rebellion inform modern governance, ethics, and leadership? Does human history reflect subtle influences of archetypal struggles between order and rebellion? Reflecting on these questions allows us to connect ancient cosmic narratives to contemporary human experience. The Anunnaki rebellion was more than a celestial conflict, it was a defining event that shaped the trajectory of human civilization. From the rebellion itself to the dispersal of factions, the subtle guidance of humanity, the preservation of ethical and technological lessons, and the integration of memory into myth, ritual, and culture, the rebellion left an enduring imprint. Its lessons are timeless. Pride unchecked by responsibility leads to downfall. Knowledge carries both opportunity and moral responsibility. Rebellion, even when defeated, leaves lasting influence. Civilizations thrive when they integrate ethical lessons into governance, law, and culture. By examining the Anunnaki rebellion, we gain insight into the universal dynamics of power, morality, and human development. It provides a mirror through which humanity can reflect on its own history, choices, and ethical responsibilities. In the end, the story of the Anunnaki rebellion is not only about gods and cosmic war, it is a story of humanity's awakening, ethical evolution, and the enduring consequences of rebellion across the cosmos and into human consciousness.